was my first year of university. I had just finished unpacking my things when my family left. Later that same day, my roommate arrived, and from the moment I met him, I could tell he was the most socially awkward person I had ever encountered. I introduced myself as Dan, extending my hand for a handshake. He hesitated, staring at my hand like he didn't understand, then awkwardly laughed and finally gave me a weak, lifeless handshake. He didn't even introduce himself. I had to ask for his name. "Dale," he replied. I tried making small talk, but he only answered with short yes or no responses, occasionally forcing a nervous laugh or smile. Within minutes, we were both sitting on our beds, glued to our laptops, in complete silence. I was already thinking about requesting a different roommate. Anyone would be better than Dale, I thought. At the time, I just assumed he was painfully shy, but soon, I would learn there was much more to him than that. That night, after exploring the campus and meeting some students, I returned to my dorm to find Dale still in the exact same spot I had left him. I greeted him with a casual, "What's up, Dale?" Unsurprisingly, he didn't respond. It was only 9:30, but with nothing else to do, I decided to go to bed. However, I had trouble falling asleep, especially with Dale still up, typing away on his laptop until nearly 3 a.m. The moment he finally shut his laptop, I was able to drift off, until I suddenly woke up an hour later. The blinds in our room were open now, letting in the pale moonlight. In that dim glow, I saw Dale sitting on the edge of his bed, staring directly at me. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and groggily asked, "Dale, what the hell are you doing?" He whispered, "Sorry," then immediately lay back down. The next morning, he was already gone when I woke up, his first time leaving the room, as far as I could tell. That Saturday was packed with orientation events, and while walking past the school gardens with my group, I overheard a couple of students whispering, "What is that kid doing?" Curious, I looked over and felt a chill of embarrassment when I saw Dale. He was crouched behind some bushes, running his hand over the bark of a tree as if he were studying it. The orientation leader didn't seem to notice, but the students near me did. As a way to break the ice, I casually mentioned, "That's my roommate." They gave me a sympathetic look, muttered an apology, and after an awkward pause, we all laughed. The interaction actually helped me make friends with those two students, and later that night we planned to hang out. When I got back to my dorm, I learned the school had already assigned me a new roommate. Things were finally starting to look up. That evening, I left to meet up with my new friends, and when I returned, Dale was sitting stiffly in the desk chair, facing the door as if he had been waiting for me. "Oh, hey," I greeted, caught off guard. "Nothing," he said flatly before I could even ask a question. I sat on my bed and opened my laptop, only to realize I had forgotten to lock it. I immediately noticed something was off. My emails had all been opened, including some I was certain I hadn't read yet. Various folders on my desktop were also open. Dale must have gone through my computer. I turned to him and asked, "Did you touch my laptop?" His response was instant, loud, and defensive. "No." He had practically cut me off before I even finished my sentence. His reaction made it obvious. He was lying. But I didn't push it. I just wanted to sleep and get through the night. As I rummaged through my drawers for my pajamas, I noticed something else. My clothes had been disturbed. They weren't in the same order I had left them. I knew Dale had been snooping through my things, but I decided to let it go since I'd be moving out the next morning. That night I woke up again, this time to the faint sound of a zipper. Still groggy, I opened my eyes and, to my horror, saw Dale crouched on the floor, rummaging through my bag. I immediately turned on my lamp. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded. Dale hesitated before muttering, "I think you have my toothbrush by mistake." It was the most effort he had put into an excuse, but it was still a bad one. I knew he was lying, but I didn't feel comfortable confronting him further. Something was seriously off about him. The next morning I moved into my new dorm, and my new roommate was a major improvement. He wasn't the most social guy, but compared to Dale, he was a breath of fresh air. That Sunday night, after a casual conversation with my new roommate, we turned off the lights and went to sleep. For the third night in a row, I woke up in the middle of the night. This time it was to an eerie clicking noise. It wasn't rhythmic, but I could hear it every few seconds. At first, I thought it might just be the building settling or something harmless, but when I listened closely, I realized the sound was coming from the door. I slowly sat up and peered through the peephole. My blood ran cold. Someone was standing on the other side, their head tilted downward so I couldn't see their face. But as I focused, I realized what the sound was. They were trying to unlock the door. Heart pounding, I grabbed my phone and quietly dialed campus police. They arrived within 5 minutes, and only then did I feel safe enough to open the door. Outside in the common room, I saw them restraining Dale in handcuffs. I told the officers everything, how he had been my former roommate, how he had gone through my things, and how I switched dorms only for him to try breaking into my new room. They took him away, and I never saw him again. I'm not sure if he was suspended or expelled, but he was gone. The rest of my time at university was normal, like any other student's experience. But even now, every so often, I think back to that first week and the unsettling, nightmarish experience of having Dale as a roommate. It was the fall of my sophomore year at Binghamton University. The chill of October was creeping in, and the air was heavy with anticipation for the weekend. My usual crew of friends and I had always been close, but this particular Friday night, we didn't have any big plans. With nothing to do, I decided to spend the evening with two of my closest friends, heading off to the school's nature preserve by the lake, a place most students didn't even know existed. The spot we chose was far from the main campus, tucked deep in the woods, and well out of the reach of security. It had a secluded clearing on the far side of the lake, hidden away from prying eyes, making it the perfect location for us to escape from the world. People occasionally came here to drink, smoke, or do whatever they wanted in the quiet solitude, but it was never crowded. That's what we liked about it. We grabbed some beers, a flashlight, and made our way to the clearing. The fire we started crackled as the cold October night pressed in around us. We were sitting around it, laughing, reminiscing, and catching up on life, what we used to call a bro chat. As the night wore on, time seemed to blur. The alcohol had begun to take its effect, and we were in that euphoric haze where everything was hilarious. I still remember my friend Mike rolling on the ground, his body convulsing with laughter as he fought to catch his breath. We were in our element, enjoying each other's company in a place that felt like our own secret hideaway. But then, just as we were at our peak, the laughter slowly died down. Out of nowhere, the cracking sound of leaves, distant but unmistakable, reached our ears. It was subtle at first, just the sound of something moving through the woods, but then it grew louder. My friend Jake, sitting across from me, held up a finger to his lips. "Shh," he whispered. We froze, our laughter forgotten in an instant. The air suddenly felt heavier, the firelight casting long, eerie shadows around us. The sound continued, slow, deliberate crunching of twigs and leaves, like someone was walking in a circle around our little camp. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my senses heightened. I didn't want to believe it, but something about the way the sounds kept circling, like they were studying us, felt wrong. I couldn't help but think of the Blair Witch Project. It was a joke between us earlier in the night, but now it felt eerily real. The sounds came closer, almost too close for comfort. My mind raced with the possibilities. Was it someone messing with us? Or something else? Then, just as I was starting to convince myself it was nothing, a loud thud echoed through the woods. My heart skipped a beat. My eyes darted around, and that's when I saw it. A branch had been thrown right into the center of our fire pit. The impact was so sudden and violent that the flames momentarily flickered as if they too were startled. Mike, who had been laughing just moments ago, shot up from the ground in a panic. "What the hell was that?" he yelled, his voice shaking. Before anyone could react, Jake bolted into the woods, his feet pounding the earth as he disappeared into the darkness. I turned to look at my other friend Tom, who was already backing away from the fire, his face pale. He was too terrified to speak. We both glanced around, feeling the weight of an unseen presence, like someone, or something, was out there watching us. I don't know why, but but the way the shadows moved, the way the wind started to pick up, it felt like we weren't alone. And then it happened. Another branch, this time larger, whizzed through the air and struck Tom directly in the face. He screamed, clutching his cheek, and I was in motion before I even realized it. I grabbed our backpack, helped him to his feet, and without a second thought, we ran. We bolted in the direction of the road separating the woods from campus. We didn't stop until we were out of the woods, our lungs burning from the sprint. As we stopped to catch our breath, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was then that we heard it. Footsteps, slow and purposeful, growing nearer to the road. Whoever or whatever was behind us was following us. Panic surged through me, and we sprinted the rest of the way back to the dorm, not daring to look back. When we reached the door, I rushed inside and ran up to my room. There we found Jake, already sitting at his desk, eyes wide with fear. We didn't have to say anything. The look on his face said it all. We glanced out his window toward the woods. Someone was there. They were pacing back and forth, moving only when a car passed, as if trying to avoid being seen. It was the same person who had been following us, I was sure of it. And then, just as quickly as they had appeared, they vanished back into the woods. The next few hours were a blur. We sat around, still trying to laugh it off, but deep down we knew something had been off. That feeling of being hunted, of being watched, never really left us. We didn't talk about it much after that night, but we never went back to that spot again. The woods held something that night, a darkness that was not meant to be disturbed. And to this day, I still wonder, who or what was out there with us in those woods? What did it want? And why did it follow us? Some things are better left unknown. My first week at the University of Iowa had just begun, and my roommate was dead set on joining a fraternity. He begged me to tag along to a party at some underground frat house on the outskirts of town. I had no interest in rushing, but a party was a party. The place was nothing like what I expected. The house stood in a rundown neighborhood, far from campus, looking like it had been abandoned before the so-called brothers moved in. The music pounded from inside, but the windows were boarded up, and the house looked barely habitable. If it weren't for the clusters of parked cars, we wouldn't have believed there was a party inside at all. The door swung open before we even knocked. A short, stocky guy in a sweat-stained t-shirt grinned at us, holding a red Solo cup. His eyes looked too eager, too aware. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of sweat, cheap beer, and something sour. The dimly lit living room was crammed with guys, almost exclusively guys. Two girls milled about, their expressions distant, disconnected. My stomach turned. Something was off. I gave it 20 minutes before signaling my roommate that I was ready to leave. But the only way out was through a pack of hulking guys blocking the door, their eyes tracking every movement in the room. We stayed a little longer, waiting for a better opportunity to slip out. Then one of them approached me. A broad-shouldered guy with a slick grin and dead eyes handed me a small bottle. "This'll get you shit-faced," he said. I didn't want to drink it, but he didn't walk away. He stood there, watching, waiting. I lifted the bottle to my lips and took a sip. The burn was immediate, but something felt wrong. My head swam, my vision blurred, and then darkness. I woke up in a pitch-black room. My head pounded. My limbs felt weak. The muffled music told me I was still in the house, but I wasn't in the party anymore. I wasn't safe. The air was thick with something damp, something rotten. As my eyes adjusted, I saw a closet door across the room. Then, a crunching sound. A footstep inside the closet. My pulse slammed in my ears. I wasn't alone. I threw myself off the bed, fumbling for the doorknob, my fingers trembling. The closet door creaked. Something was moving inside it. I yanked the door open and sprinted out, nearly colliding with my roommate. I grabbed him, pulling him toward the exit. The guys near the door sneered but didn't stop us. They knew. They watched. We drove back in silence, my roommate gripping the wheel with white knuckles. I told him what happened. His face paled.
"Do we call the cops?" he asked. I shook my head. "They won't believe us." He swallowed hard. Then he asked the question I had been dreading. "Did they do anything to you?" I didn't know. My clothes were intact. My body felt the same. But something was taken from me that night. Something unseen. Something I can never get back. I never stepped foot in another frat house again.
I had a single dorm room my sophomore year, tucked in the farthest corner of the floor, isolated from the others. At first, I loved the privacy, until the knocking started. It began as a faint tapping late one night while I was studying for a bio exam. I called out, "Come in." Silence. I got up and opened the door. Nothing. The hallway was empty. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly. I chalked it up to exhaustion and went back to studying. The next night, the knocking returned, louder this time, a slow, deliberate rhythm. I called out again. No answer. My heart thudded against my ribs. I yanked the door open. No one. But this time, I ran down the short corridor and turned the corner, scanning the hallway. Nothing. I confronted my floormates the next morning, but they all swore they hadn't heard a thing. Their sincerity unsettled me more than if they had laughed it off. That night, I had just drifted into sleep when... bang, bang, bang. My eyes snapped open. The door shook under the force of the pounding. I froze. Whoever was outside wasn't just knocking anymore. They wanted in. Then, silence. Swallowing my fear, I shot out of bed and wrenched the door open. A shadow moved at the end of the hallway, a figure disappearing around the far corner. I ran, my heart hammering in my chest. When I turned the corner, I saw a door shutting. The communal bathroom. I hesitated. Then, gripping the doorknob, I shoved it open. Darkness. I reached for the light. It flickered to life, casting a sickly yellow glow. The stalls were shut. My breath came in ragged gasps. I dropped to my hands and knees and peered under the doors. Boots. Heavy black boots. I swallowed. My fingers twitched as I reached for the nearest stall door. I threw it open. Nothing. The boots were there, but they were empty. Then from behind me, a laugh. Low, gravelly, a sound that curdled my blood. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. The bathroom was empty, but the laugh hadn't come from inside the stalls. It had come from directly behind me. I bolted, back to my room, slammed the door shut and locked it. The knocking returned minutes later. Soft, persistent. I covered my ears. I never opened the door again. The next morning, I told my floormates. No one believed me. No one had seen anything. No one had heard anything. I stopped asking. But every night I went to sleep with my door locked, my breath shallow, my ears straining for the sound I knew would come again. And every night, just before sleep took me, it did.